Looks like it's live. Well, I don't really have much of a plan for this stream. Well, actually, I never have a plan, so I don't know why I'm even saying that. That's a given. Welcome to AHOC. There's no plan. Anyway, so probably what I'll be doing is I'm not really sure what I want to do. We'll see. Like, not sure what I want to test first. I guess we can try some CPU overclocking first. YT chat much more civilized. YT chat's generally more civilized. It also helps that here I try to stream like serious content instead of games. Is it going to blow up? I really hope not. I have a 3950X in there. Actually, I should do the system specs. I was wondering what I'd forgotten for the stream. There we go, we've got system specs up. Okay, so Biostar claims support for up to, well, claims the motherboard can do up to 4933 memory, which we're gonna check. I'm not sure if I want to check that first, or like, what should we start with? New desk like. No, I think the camera just white balanced differently since I'm not using yeah, the camera's white balance is just different because I'm not on the RGB with the RGB cooler, the camera for whatever reason just keeps changing white balance. Since it's not RGB anymore, it's like, oh, now the white balance is very cold actually. Like that EVGA logo isn't supposed to be blue. It's supposed to be, well, it's like a pale white, but it's not that blue. How about the 5100 ballistic sticks? These can do 5,000. These sticks can do 5,000. Actually, I think they can even do 5100. So we don't need to use the 5100 sticks. I think though, like, because the thing is, those 5100 sticks are like easy mode for getting high memory frequency. So I want to see what this does with like a somewhat normal memory kit. Okay, so what's in the main? Main has nothing. Okay. AMD CBS, which looks like it normally does. What else do we have? Chipset. Okay, and then we have tweaker. Okay. Let's see the voltage ranges. That's sort of the first thing that I want to see. Okay, so we have override mode. Okay, we can go to 2 volts on VCore. That's great. It's lovely. Oh, we have load line calibration. How many levels? Okay. I'm gonna... Which direction does the load line go in? Who knows? We'll find out, I guess. We're gonna start at 4 gigahertz on the CPU. Actually, 39. We're gonna start with like 1.25 volts. We're gonna start... Actually, if that's maxed load line right now, that's gonna be very hot. So we're not gonna do that there. That way I won't... Like, no matter what I do, we're not getting more than 1.15, and that's fine. So we have override on that. Invalid input range. Okay. What about 1.3? Okay, you'll take 1.5. So, okay, so this maxes out at 1.5. Cool. Cool. So that's a good voltage range right there. Okay, we're gonna go. Wait, can I not just... Okay, how do you... 0? How do I get it back to... Oh, right, I guess you just do that. Okay, well, whatever. Yeah, 1.1, I'm happy with that. Do you... Voltage. Oh, no. 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 Why? I guess it tops out at 1.8. Which we don't need on these DIMMs, but man, this is a horrible way to set memory voltage. No, Biostar is like... Biostar's been around for ages and ages and ages. They're not new to making motherboards. But yeah, they're very popular as far as I know in like Asia, because they make really cheap motherboards. Lots of really cheap motherboards. They're like yeah, that's basically their focus. And at some point in time, they have made high-end boards like way back in the day, but they don't do that anymore. Or, well, I think they've tried, like, well, they don't make good high-end motherboards anymore. let's put it that way. If I put it manual... Okay, we're just going to start with 3600 and see what happens. FCLK frequency. Oh, so at least they didn't do the thing that Gigabyte does where you need to go digging through like so many submenus to get to your FCLK. Power down, cool. Like, yeah. I have gear down mode as you'd expect. Where's my drive strengths? Bio, where's the drive strengths? Why can't I see the memory insight? What's this? Oh, that just pulls up the SPDs. Okay, cool. Well, that's bloody useless. VDDP. So there's no VTT DDR, which is, and this is dumb. And, well, this is also dumb. But luckily, that voltage doesn't matter, so we don't have to worry about it. CPU SoC switching frequency, CPU switching frequency. There's no load line for the CPU. I mean, for the SoC. Okay, that's interesting. We're going to start at 400 kilohertz, because I've seen some reviews of this board where it runs, like, the VRM on this. It's a really weird VRM, because it's like, it's a 6-phase with 90 amp smart power stages, but every single review I've seen of this motherboard has it running stupid hot. So it's like, either they're running it at, like, 1 megahertz out of the box, so, like, up here, or what I'm thinking is the inductors are too small, the power plane is too thin, like the whole, because it's a 4-layer board. It's like a nice, it's like a really cheap board. Thanks, Stig, for the 20 Norwegian kroner. So I'm kind of like, yeah. So this apparently runs hot. I might do full thermal tests on this. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, let's set some DRAM timings, like 18. Actually, that's loose. 16, 18, 18, 18. Wait, right. Different die. 38. Okay, we'll leave it at that. So now, do we have drive strengths? That is... No... Okay, we do have them. They're just buried all the way over here. Drive strengths. Yeah. Okay, so we can get to those. Cool. And that's good. So, like, there's no settings missing, which... Well, the AMD overclocking menu is missing, but that's mostly okay. SoC on Core OC mode, let's enable that. And with that, I'm happy. let's see if this boots. Unfortunately, the board does not have any troubleshooting functionality whatsoever. It does have RGB, but no postcode, no LEDs, no nothing. So this is going to be... also, it seems to have a surprisingly long like post time, so this is going to be very fun. Okay, so that works. If that didn't work, I would have, like, just ended the stream right there and given it, like, it's not worth it. If you can't boot 3600 CL16, it's not worth it. Anyway, let's... Oh, I should maybe update hardware info, because technically the voltage controller on this should be supported by hardware info, but... currently it doesn't pick it up. Right? Like, here we have some temperature readings, and those are all completely bugged out, which that's not surprising. Oh, looks like we have the glitchy USB ports on this. Yay! Remember glitchy USB ports? It's not as bad as some of the other boards. What am I... I'm on a USB 2.0. Oh, well, I guess we're gonna go kill global C states. I guess I could also update the BIOS, but... We'll do that later. Sure, it has beep code support. Yeah, but the thing is, I can't do beep codes. I've never used them. Also, the couple of motherboards that have both a postcode and beep codes, like, in my experience, like, the beep codes don't really tell you anything other than, oh, it didn't post. Which is like... Why, thank you for telling me that I can see with my eyes. Right? Like, because, like, the few boards I have that have beep codes, like, if you screw up your memory settings, they just beep, hey, your memory settings are wrong. And it's just like, well, thanks, I can see that. Because the thing for me is, like, I want an indication of, like, what part, like, like, what the board's doing. I don't care about the final, like, error at the end of the whole post process. I don't care what the final error is. I want to see how it's rolling through the codes. Anyway, what did I want to do? Right, kill global C states, which means find global C states, which they should be somewhere down here. Nathan, thanks for the $5. What's a good $200 to $300 X570 motherboard that has decent RAM overclocking? Have X570 Tough Plus, trying to get my 3200 CL16 to 3600 CL16. Your Tough should have no problem doing that, and if it is having a problem, you're doing something wrong. Or the BIOS that you're currently on is just completely broken, which wouldn't really surprise me, considering the current state of Ryzen BIOSes. Also, didn't I just do a bunch of videos rounding up motherboards? So, thanks for the $5, but, like, yeah, that's all the help you're getting on that. Where's global C states? It's not, okay, well, it's not supposed to be there. Max, oh. No, that's data fabric. I want global. No, I guess we could try to kill this. Okay, now that's USB stuff. Alright, CPU configure. Ah, global C states. Finally. Disable. Can you put on some Celine Dion music? No. Especially since I don't even know who that is. Impressions of the Biostar board so far. I haven't done anything so far. So I just realized the window's too small. I mean, actually, there's no troubleshooting functionality, so we can cover up the whole motherboard, because there's nothing to see. Okay, well, the mouse works now, which is good. I'm gonna run some Cinebench and look at our voltage readings. Okay, I don't know if this is gonna be like all the droop or no droop. Okay, so that's like that's dropping 70 millivolts. Which is okay. That's what you'd expect. Interesting that this voltage reading here is like the same as that. Or, well, that right there. That normally doesn't happen, because I'm assuming that's from the... Yeah, that is from the Super I/O, so that's neat. Okay, well, the score is low, which you'd expect, because we're at like 3.9 gigahertz. That's pretty normal so far. Let's try messing with the LC settings. -7TC. You've never seen glitched out software before? You think the VRM will overheat. I mean, if I wanted to make the VRM overheat, it'll overheat. Like, this is not exactly a very impressive VRM. Man, this thing posts forever. Why does it take so long? Okay, let's try level 6, because I kind of wonder what it does on level 6. What's the PC specs? I bet it doesn't have a case. Of course it doesn't have a case. Why would it have a case? Cases are for normies. CSM is probably enabled because, like, most of my GPUs just don't do UEFI for some reason. Well, okay, no, there's a bunch of AMD GPUs with modded BIOSes that I have that don't do UEFI for a very good reason. But this is a vanilla GT 1030. I haven't done anything to it, and yet it also, for some reason, always triggers CSM. So... But even then, it's like I have other boards that boot faster with CSM. Back at 1.15, and let's see what happens to the V-core. It shouldn't change. Okay, no, there's still a little bit of E-droop. Okay, that's interesting, but yeah, we're just gonna run the maximum. We're gonna just stick to level 1 then. Hope it will be a good board. Good for like a Ryzen 5 3600, probably. Good for a 3950X, I have my doubts. I wonder if this has OCP, and I wonder if I can trip it. One of my biggest concerns with this motherboard is that I actually measured the size of the inductors. Because there's no way to know what exact... Like, I don't have a way of asking Biostar, like, hey, which inductors did you use? And these seem to be 7.4 by 7.2 by, like, 3 millimeters. And they're 220 nanohenries. Which, looking at DigiKey, that gives you, like, 29 amps of ISAT. Which, like, that's saturation current. And then, like, a 23 amps average current, which is like... Oh, no? Actually, let's pull some inductors up. So... Let me just... Continue. Okay, let's just skip over to here, right? So if we go over to inductors, because the thing is, like, for a given size of inductor, well, there can be a lot of variance in the like capabilities, but it's not going to be that big. There's a pretty hard limit on how much current an inductor can handle for a given size and given inductance. So these are 220 nanohenries, which we can read off the label on them. So we can just scroll over to 220, which is here. Apply that. And then I want inductors roughly in the size that these are. So I want 7.4 millimeters. So we're gonna go from like I'm gonna go down to like there, all the way to there. And I also want them to be relatively low profile, because these really aren't, well, actually, you know what? We don't even need to check the height. Let's just go maximum saturation current. So saturation current is the current at which the inductance of the inductor starts drastically dropping. Because basically, like, the magnetic field in the core is maxed out, pretty much. And that's bad for voltage regulation. Very, very bad for voltage regulation. Because basically you go from having an inductor that's like 220 nanohenries to being way, way, way lower inductance, which is very bad. Anyway, so the thing is, like, this is what? This is a 7, yeah, so this is like roughly the same size as what we have on the board. And this would actually be okay, but 23 amps average current is like, so this is the, like, this is, will the inductor overheat, basically, rating. And yeah, that's not great, because this is a 6-phase. And I normally don't pay attention to inductors, because even, like, you really need to, like, try to screw up your inductor selection. Basically, as long as they aren't tiny, and the inductance isn't gigantic, like, they're fine. But then this board has, like, some of the smallest inductors I've ever seen in a V-Core VRM on a motherboard, so it's like, oh, I wonder if that's why all the other reviewers have this board running super hot. Anyway, but the ones that most closely match, like, the physical size of the ones on this board are, like, these ones right here, which are, like, 29 amps saturation, 26 amps current rating. And those are 7.4 millimeters by 7.2, because these are actually square. Like, the inductors on this thing are very, very square. Oh, but these are really tall. Okay, so it's probably not those, but those still suck. Yeah, I wish I had an actual spec for these, but I don't. Anyway, so yeah, the inductors are kind of small, and the current rating on them is kind of, like, potentially very low. Anyway, I wonder if I can pull up the thing is, I'm kind of thinking that this being a Biostar board, they probably didn't program that. Like, if I just enable this, it should load up limits from the motherboard, but I'm not sure that it'll do it correct. Like, that Biostar bothered with, like, putting that in the board. Like, the BIOS might not have limits programmed. Thanks, Cameron, for the $10. Nice work on the hardcore MOBO content. No one else is doing it. Glad you like it. Anyway. Let's see. Wait. Oh, wait, I still have the CPU in manual mode. Well, it might still load up the limits, though. Oh, no, it didn't. And Ryzen Master doesn't work on this operating system for some reason. Oh, well, that's a shame. Oh, I have a USB stick plug it in. Perfect. So we can just get hardware info. Ryzen CPUs running super hot at idle has been a thing for as long as Ryzen CPUs have had the... Well, basically since like 3000 series. Like, that's been a thing since 3000 series, just because of how AMD's boost system works. And it's always worked this way. I don't know why everybody's so surprised that, like, a 7nm chiplet with 8 cores that has a boost algorithm that's designed to basically smash as much power through any one core as possible, wouldn't, you know, make the chip run ridiculously hot all of the time. Like, yeah. Okay, got a new hardware info version. I just need to go over to Tweaker and set this to auto. Set that back to auto and set that back. Actually, no, we're going to keep that overridden, but I'm going to put it back down to 1.05 there. That should engage PBO. Now it's idling even higher on Asus boards compared to MSI boards. The idle boost curve is way too aggressive compared to other boards. Did you actually test that yourself, or are you hearing that from other people? 90C idle. You have to have, like, in order to hit 90C idle, you have to have, like, one single core workload that's absolutely hammering your system. What software do you have running at idle? Do you have, like, anything, like, oh, I don't know, motherboard software, peripheral software, you know, the usual bloatware that you get from your RGB garbage manufacturers? B550 Tomahawk Max. Any CPU limit? I wouldn't put a 16 core in that. What PBO settings do you recommend for the 5800X? I don't know, actually, because I don't have a 5800X, and the thing is, PBO is really sensitive to CPU differences. Like, if you have Corsair iQ or something installed and your system is idling at 90, it's Corsair iQ, or what is it that NZXT has? Because, like, a lot of those utilities are just awful for your idle. Like, basically, you can't idle if you have one of those utilities. You're not actually idle, because they screw up the power management, or, well, they just screw up your CPU's ability to idle. I don't think PBO... Okay, so the default PBO limits on this board just don't do anything. I wonder if that's the VRM temperature. Yeah, so PBO on this, like, enabling PBO just didn't do anything, so that's disappointing. We're gonna hit this with IBT. Actually, I'm gonna go for... Oh, no, I'm gonna go with high, and I'm gonna run it 30 times. So, the lazy way to figure out what your VRM temperature reading is, like, which sensor on your motherboard is the VRM temperature, is to just fire off a heavy all-core workload, wait for all the temperatures to ramp up, and then put a fan over the VRM heatsink, and if whichever temperature starts dropping the fastest is probably your VRM. So that's topped out at... Oh no, it keeps going up. Thing is, IBT load cycles, so this is not ideal. So now that's at 80. Like, what part of the system could be at 80? Is it the chipset? No, the chipset's... Like, I have a contactless thermometer that I'm pointing at parts of the board. Unfortunately, I can't really get at the VRM because the water block and the heatsink... Well, water block and stuff is in the way. Oh, okay. I think that 85-degree temperature is probably the VRM. Well, that's 93. And this is on stock. The board's reading 85. I think I was just... I don't think I was measuring the actual VRM. I'm pretty sure I just measured the power plane. So that's concerning, isn't it? So... Because we're at stock. Like, the chip... This is at 3.7 gigahertz. I mean, 3.7 when... in the CPU... Because IBT load cycles, but once it loads up again, it'll drop down to 3.75. Yeah, so we're back at 3.7. And the board's hitting freaking 90. Good job, motherboard. Good job. You suck. I think the VRM is actually over 100 at this point. Because, like, the stuff near the VRM is at, like, I saw a 97 with another measurement. So, yeah, this thing's trash. I don't know how they managed to use 90 amp smart power stages and build something like this. Well, actually, I kind of do. Probably. So what I'm thinking of doing with this board is I want to mess around with, like, replacing the inductors and maybe upgrading the power plane to see if we can't, like, if I can't get the temperature to stop being terrible. Best budget OC board for a 5900X. I can't decide. Did you, like, I just... Like, what is it with everybody coming into my chat and asking me questions that I've answered in bloody videos? Oh, wait, that's not, like, that doesn't... Well, what, like, define what your budget overclocking motherboard has to do. Seriously. I hate people who go like, I need the best overclocking motherboard on a budget. And I'm like, what's your budget? $700? $500? $200? $50? Because if it's $50, you just have to buy the cheapest gigabyte. Expected it to be bad. Terrible, I think is what you said. Well, for this? Yeah, I did expect it to be terrible, but, like, this is worse. Wait, oh, it's thermal throttling. What's thermal throttle? It's not the CPU. Oh, the motherboard's VRM. I think we hit the VRM thermal limit already. And whatever that temperature sensor is measuring is... I think that temperature sensor is actually the VRM. They just put it, like, in the completely wrong location. So it's measuring, like, garbage. We're gonna put a fan on the I'm gonna put a fan on the airflow restrictor that, you know, they've put right here because, yeah, it's not bad enough that your board runs hot. You need to make sure it can't get airflow. And see if we can do something about the thermal throttling. Like, these are smart power stages, so at least I trust them to shut down if, like, this goes a bit out of control. Also, where did the fans go? I normally have a fan sitting on my desk. Where did it go? Oh, found it. Yeah, the airflow restrictor is actually like a major problem. I don't know how to, like. Yeah, this fan's a bit too big for this. I'm gonna go find a better fan. Which one is it? Well, that doesn't look very impressive, but at least it should fit. And now we wait if the VRM temperature recovers. And the... Okay, so now it's at 93. So yeah, as you can clearly see, just... Oh no, it's back up at 95. The issue is, I think that temperature sensor literally doesn't go over 95. So the VRM might actually be, like, way, way hotter than whatever the hell that is reading. Oh, we're at 90 now. We might be making progress. The sensors aren't updating very fast. Can I do something about that? It's set to 50 milliseconds, so that sensor's just slow, I guess. It seems to be coming down a little bit. 89. Yeah, I think this actually helped. 87. So that is the VRM temperature. It's also inaccurate, which is freaking great, because, like... Of course, why would you implement a temperature sensor correctly, right? Like, wait a minute. I wonder if the reviewers reviewing this board... Oh no, the Tech Power Up definitely used thermocouples. But yeah, this is why you never trust software, because there's a lot of motherboards which will have VRM temperature sensors that max out at, like, some arbitrary low temperature that isn't, like... And then, of course, the temperature keeps rising above that, and the sensor just keeps reading the same thing. I mean, I'm surprised there even is a temperature reading in the first place. Like, at least there's a temperature reading, because there's a lot of boards that wouldn't give you a VRM temperature reading at all. Asus. Yeah, like, the fact that it doesn't go over, what, 98, while the VRM was thermal throttling is like, and there was no way it was actually at 98, because I was measuring frickin' 97 on the power plane when it was at 95. So yeah, the little fan made a huge difference. It's actually kind of neat how you can just, like, that the fan just jams in there and like, stays. I rather like that. So now I guess we get to start overclocking, and I smell like warm plastic. Yeah, I smell warm plastic. I think that's the I/O cover. Because, yeah, it's kind of warm. It's not that hot, but I guess it got really hot, and so now I smell warm plastic. Lovely. Lovely. Oh, wait, I think it bottomed out at 82 degrees. Like, the temperature doesn't seem to be progressing downwards much anymore. Anyway, let's do some CPU overclocking. Imagine the fan melting. I hope not. The thing is, they use 90 amps more power stages on this thing, and it still gets insanely hot, and it's just like, what did you do? Like, basically all the heat your VRM produces, ignoring switching losses, right, is down to the resistance of everything in the, well, everything between the CPU and the power stages. And actually the resistance of the power stages themselves, right? Like that's your conduction loss in your VRM. So you have the resistance of the power stages, the resistance of the switch node, the resistance of the, and by switch node I refer to the little tiny little bit of metal that connects the power stage to the inductor. So that has some resistance, which should be so low that we should be able to ignore it. The inductor has some resistance, which again, generally should be so low that you should be able to ignore it because, well, even cheap inductors will have like point something milliohms of resistance, which is less than most cheap MOSFETs. And then you'll have your power plane, which hopefully should be in some low milliohm range in terms of resistance. And yeah, and all of those things, as current flows through them, produce heat based on how much resistance they have. So here it's like, well, the power stages are really good. So most of that heat has to come from somewhere else, probably. And let's see if I can do a 42. We're just going to be running Cinebench, which isn't really like hard. Happy holidays. Thanks for all the content you make. Thanks for the $5, Tobias. Let's see. So I'm going to go with level 1, because like level 1 wasn't super droopy anyway, so that's fine. And we're going to go override and 1.3. And now the motherboard will explode. It won't. Level 1 LLC is max droop, so... the board is 4 layers. You don't have to wonder. It's 4 layers. I know it's 4 layers. I've looked. Melt the VRM cover. I'd rather not. Like, I want to mod the board. Like, I have some really bad ideas for what I want to do with this board. Like, mostly... Because I still have... Well, I definitely have at least 6 220 nanohenry inductors off of some dead GPUs. So, I want to swap out the inductors for, like, Vega inductors. Which should significantly... Like, assuming the inductors are actually really underpowered... or more like really high resistance, that should help the VRM thermals quite a bit. And then I want to mess around with like tweaking the power plane. Because like looking at this board, I'm pretty sure like the power plane seems to be literally 1 layer. At its thinnest point, it's 1 layer. Whereas if you look at a lot of high-end boards, they'll actually have a power fill all the way from the VRM to the socket, depending on how many layers are available. So this thing is just like, well, it's a low-end motherboard. So there's our VRM temperature right now at 53. CPU's in the 70s, that's cool. 1.225 volts there. The thing is, Cinebench is not hard. Cinebench is not super heavy. Also, I should have thrown the new version of hardware info on this. Okay, 9780, that's nice and easy. I wonder, well, let's try break 10K on this. It's just easy. What? Oops, what did I click on? Yeah. Why is it in easy access then? Anyway. Hardware info. Where's the hardware info folder on this system? I'll just drop it on the desktop. It's not like it's gonna get, like, this OS is already a mess. It's not like it's gonna get worse. Is this like, I think it's, I'm not sure that it's a newer version than what I already have on here, but I'm hoping it's a newer version. I forgot to check sensors only. Is it safe to assume the highest temp readout on this board is VRM? I already figured out which temperature sensor is the VRM on the previous version of hardware info. And it was temperature sensor number 2, and temperature, and it doesn't read the actual VRM temperature. It tops out before the VRM temperature does. The other thing I wanted to check is how much voltage difference there is between the inductors in the VRM and the actual, like, dye sense. Because that'll give us some idea, like, right coming off, voltage right at the inductors versus dye sense voltage. Though, ideally, actually, dye sense voltage would tell us how much power we're losing, like, from the VRM to the CPU, but a lot of that will be in the socket itself. So what I'll probably do during this stream is I'll actually tip the board, like, put it sideways, so that I can measure from a capacitor in the socket to the capacitors on the VRM. Anyway, so I'm going to take the VRM cooling fan out for a little bit, because I do want to take some measurements. There we go. So that's, so I'm taking ground off of a standoff, which, not perfect, but it should work okay for this. Well, it's not a great way to do this, but I'm just wondering how much, like, this is not a super accurate measurement is what I'm trying to say. There. Or, like, this is not the correct way to do this measurement at all. I just want a rough indication of what to expect. Okay, well, I can't reach the inductor on, like, the closest inductor to the CPU, I can't get the probe to it. And well, I was kind of expecting that, but yeah, so we're getting 1.23 on the die, and the VRM is spitting out 1.44 on the far inductor, which is not the best place to measure. Ideally, I'd want to measure, well, like, once I have the board sideways, we'll measure everywhere. But yeah, that's losing some, what is it? 190 millivolts? And what are we pushing in terms of current? Actually is, oh, I didn't pick up the, I don't trust the current reading in the software. Like, it says it topped out at 130, but actually for Cinebench, that's probably accurate. One, 2, 8. Goodbye, VRM. And yeah, it's reading the current correctly. 190 amps. Oh, man. And the VRM's at 82. 85. That's with the little fan on it. I'm going to put the fan closer to the actual power stages. 93. 95, 96. And we're thermal throttling. VRM's overheated already. That took a couple seconds. Yeah, so the current reading was correct. So we were pushing 130 amps, and there was like 200 almost 200 millivolts of voltage loss between the VRM and the CPU die sense, which is like, yeah. That's, like, if you do the math on that, we're losing what? 130 times 190 millivolts. Now, some of that's going to be in the socket, which is why it's not super useful, but... So that's like 25 watts of power loss, just getting the power from the VRM to the CPU. It's not great. Anyway, Prime 95 overheats in a couple seconds. To absolutely nobody's surprise. And apparently I missed a super chat. Why haven't you got a girlfriend yet? You who became so famous. Because that sounds like work. Melt that VR. I already responded to the VRM cover thing. Like, look, either I can test the motherboard, or I can read chat. Like, I can't do both. I have only 2 eyes, and well, yeah, that's kind of it. 90 amp power stages. Yeah, there's a bunch of 90 amp power stages. Actually, what's really funny is you can actually see, like, these exposed power stages that they have on the top edge. That's the SoC VRM. That's also more 90 amp power stages. So yeah, this board is quite something. $95 watt TDP at most on that motherboard. If you put a fan on the VRM, you can totally run a 140 watt CPU. You just, well, no, yeah, 140 you should be okay-ish. The thing is, so this board is like the perfect example of, like, unfortunate. As much as I wish that it was as simple as just having good power stages and your VRM was good, like, there's still, you know, all the stuff between the CPU and the power stages, like your inductors and your capacitors, the controller and how that's set up. Which the controller mostly will, like, affect your will mostly affect, like, your voltage regulation, and that could, well, actually no. If you have a ton of power plane resistance, it makes it super hard for the VRM to deal with transients, because when a transient hits, the VRM, like all your capacitors, your power stages are already at a really high duty cycle on a load release, right? Because instead of, like, so the CPU wants 1.2 volts, and the VRM is outputting 1.44 volts. And this is, mind you, I have a target voltage of 1.3. So when a load release happens on a VRM like this, right, the voltage immediately starts coming, like, what CPU stops pulling current, right? Voltage immediately starts heading towards the voltage that we have at the output of the VRM, right? Which, if that's sitting at 1.44 bloody volts, this thing probably, like, you're going to just get a bunch of overshoot, because you're coming right back, like, because basically the resistance drops the voltage only as long as there's current through it. So when the current draw drops to 0, the voltage at the end of the power plane is suddenly equal at the start of the power plane. And so that's bad. That's really, really bad. So the voltage regulation on this thing is probably whack as well. Mind you, I have this thing, like, I'm underclocking the VRM, and it's still overheating very quickly. Just absolutely unsurprised. Well, I mean, I expected this to happen, but still doesn't change how disappointed I am. I had a Sabertooth 990FX, and unfortunately it randomly up and died on me. I actually had I had 2 990FX Asus boards randomly up and die on me. Like, one day they would just refuse, like, they would just refuse to detect the CPU for no reason. Still great boards, though, as long as they worked. And the Sabertooth actually lasted for a while. Like, And I ran it on LN2 several times, so I'm not too annoyed with the Sabertooth up and dying. Let's see if we can run Cinebench now. If my new PSU only have 70 ms on the power good signal. What is the power good signal 70 milliseconds slow or 70 milliseconds to, like... Do you have a link to the measurement? Like, I need some context to that. I had a Rampage IV Extreme before. I still have a Rampage 4 Extreme. Those boards are amazing. Anyway, let's see if this will run at 4.4. And no, it won't. I also have a 990FX Extreme 9. I have, like, a lot... Like, for 990FX, I basically have... Well, I haven't had a Crosshair 5. But I'll probably eventually have a Crosshair 5 as well. My hardware collecting habits are insane. Let's put it that way. Rampage IV Black Edition. I always wanted a Black Edition. Actually, I still want a Black Edition. Buildzoid, please make this stream available to watch later. And, maybe. Maybe. Depends how this goes. Get a Crosshair 5. Even half-dead one I used was fun. Yeah, like, the thing is, I already have, like, a Crosshair 4 Extreme. And so it's like, I'm not sure if I should go for... Like, if the chance comes up to get a really cheap Crosshair 5 formula, I'm picking up one up. It's just right now, it's like at this point, I have so many boards for like every single platform I care about that it's like, I really need to lay off the non-stop secondhand motherboard purchases. Formula Z is T-top. I suspected that would be the case, because my Rampage 4 Extreme is Daisy Chain, but the Black Edition, I believe, is T-topology. So, yeah, it's like fun differences between the various Asus boards right there. So Crosshair 5 should actually be better for frequency validations for memory. Have you run folding at home? I haven't. NetBurst. NetBurst is too old. I refuse to use any architecture that is like... Well, I'm not gonna use any socket older than AM3 or 1366. 1366 is really cool, and AM3 is cool, mostly because like Phenom 2s also run in AM3 Plus, and so those are both cool. And anything older than that, it's just too old. Because if I don't restrict myself to not going for even older motherboards, I'm gonna like end up burying myself in motherboards. So it's like, as much as some of the old boards look cool and apparently the platforms are really fun, it's like maybe once I get bored of the stuff I already have, I'll start considering getting even older stuff. Does daisy chain vs T-top matter much for memvalid? On DDR4, the difference is insane. Like on DDR4, daisy chain versus T-topology is no contest. The daisy chain dunks on a T-topology so hard. On DDR3, I'm not sure. BZ, I think you have mental illness where you are collecting old hardware. I don't know what it is. I'm not collecting that old hardware. Does topology influence how tight the timings can get? Kinda? Though mostly it just affects the max frequency. Any idea what the 990FX UD3 uses? Those are daisy chains. Yeah, Gigabyte didn't start using T-topology until the Z77 boards. Okay, I'm starting to think this board actually won't do 4.4, which is actually kind of disappointing. I can't believe they give you the option to run the VRM switching frequency higher. Like, the VRM already overheats. If you max out that switching frequency, like, why? Like, it overheats on a stock 3950X. And they're like, yeah, totally, you can max out, you can go to 900 kilohertz switching frequency. It's like, what? Why would you do that? It barely functions at 400. Memvalid score record was set on Formula Z, so I think T-top doesn't matter. Yeah, it might not. Like, since DDR3 doesn't run at frequencies as high as DDR4, the topology should have less of an effect. Was there actually boards with T-top before 1155? I don't think so. Check the B450 Tough Gaming Pro S. There is literally no reviews, and they say it's better than Tomahawk, and it will handle 5000 Ryzen. I don't feel like testing it. Like, I'm so happy that I got rid of all the low-end AM4 boards I had at one point in time. It's like, I don't want to go back to that. And I already just picked up this stupid Biostar thing. Which hopefully I can turn this into a good motherboard. Man, imagine if I fix the power drop. Like, if I fix the power plane, that would probably help a lot. I think I'm just going to throw some 18 gauge wires from the capacitor legs over to the socket. And if that works well, then maybe I'll actually look at building doing an actual copper foil for the power plane instead of freaking wires. Is getting low TRCD limited by the IMC or memory? Both. So getting low TRCD on TRCD. So Samsung BDI is like the only memory IC where TRCD scales with voltage. So if you don't have Samsung BDI, you're stuck with high TRCD. There's nothing you can really do about it. TRCD also depends on your silicon lottery. So even though a lot of ICs have a really high TRCD wall and it doesn't scale with voltage, some ICs with the silicon lottery, you'll see like a difference of, say, Micron Rev B. You might see some TRC, like some sticks at 3600 will need like TRCD 20, and some sticks will do TRCD as low as like 16, or even 15 maybe. I've not checked, but if you have something, and so that's one thing, is like there's silicon lottery on basically all of the timings, but TRCD is also affected by it. And then with Samsung BDI specifically, so you have silicon lottery on the memory sticks. Some do low TRCD, some don't. And then there's also the issue that TRCD puts way more load on your memory controller than like TCL does. So like dropping 2 ticks of TRCD way harder on your memory controller than 2 ticks of CAS latency. Or even 1 tick of CAS latency. Like 1 tick of TRCD is just harder than 1 tick of CAS latency, which is why some memory vendors, actually why there's so many memory kits, especially in the high frequency ranges from like 4400 up, where the TRCD on them at XMP is like 22 or something. And it's not done because the sticks won't do lower TRCD, it's because it's for compatibility with with memory controllers, where it's like if the TRCD was 18, there's a lot of CPUs that wouldn't, at 4600 TRCD 18, very hard. Very hard on your memory controller. And so instead, you have a kit that might be able to do 4600 18 with an XMP that's 18 22 22, so that your memory so that people's memory controller doesn't freak out when it runs into that memory kit. Anyway, so that's 10k Cinebench. Let's see how valid Biostar's claims of DDR4 4933 are. Z590 launch, anyone knows? DDR5... Z590 does not get DDR5. I can tell you for sure it will not run DDR5. DDR5, I would expect it towards the end of next year. What is normal latency on Ryzen without crazy OC? Normal, like, what settings? Like 3200 CL16, you're going to be looking at over 70 nanoseconds in IDA. Probably even 80 nanoseconds or something. I don't normally run my RAM at 3200. That sounds like a very normie frequency to run your memory at. Anyway, so 42. And first I want to see, does this actually desync properly? I'm going to bump up that memory voltage. Actually, is there a memory voltage reading somewhere? Oh, there is. There is a memory voltage reading. Oh my god. Why? Yeah, no. Okay, the mouse in this BIOS does not work. I mean, you shouldn't use the mouse in the BIOS anyway, but there's a, like, all the way over on the side, right? Voltage reading. So it is at 1.44 right now, so I want to go up to 1.6 with these DIMMs. Actually, maybe over 1.6, because this board kind of sucks. So we might need a little bit extra juice. And we're going to go 25, 25, no. So, weird thing about Ryzen, or at least the Ryzen BIOSes, is a lot of them don't like uneven TRCD for some reason. And it seems to be kind of CPU specific, but it's just like, if you're going for max frequency, run even timings. It makes your life easier. And we're going to go for 50. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that, so let's see if that boots 4000. Like 3600, 17, 18, 1835, I'm getting 65 nanoseconds. Wait, Ryzen 5000 or 3000? Also, what are your subtimings like? What is better on T-topology? 4-layer PCB B450 mortar max? The B450 mortar max is not T-topology. That's a daisy chain motherboard. So you should go for 2x16. Definitely 2x16 on a mortar. On a B450 mortar, actually any mortar, 2x16. Always 2x16 on those boards. They're all daisy chain, and, well, that's basically all you need to know. Actually, we're not going to go straight to 4400. How do you save profiles? Can you save profiles? Oh, okay, you can save profiles. Okay, we should save a profile. Yes. Cool. They actually have QVL, like the QVL on this board does go to 4000. Oh, it still boots, okay. I mean, 4266 isn't really that hard. It's not like, well, let's see 4400. Past 4400, things start getting interesting. It's not synced if I'm at 4400. Seriously, why do you even need to ask that? Do you actually think that a 3950X is doing, what, 2133 FCLK? Okay, 4400, neat. 4600 maybe? Regular or enthusiast would be much better word. Nah, normies. I like, sounds better. And it's shorter. Like, oh yeah, content targeted at regular users. Nah, content targeted at normies. It's faster to say. It's more efficient. Okay, so we're at 4600. I gotta say, I'm kind of impressed. 4733? Do you record camera capture card separately? No. Like, I think being called a casual is more offensive than being called a normie. Right? Because if you're a normie, you can still take something seriously. Whereas if you're a casual, that implies you're unable to be serious about things. Or, like, yeah. Anyway. But, okay, so 4733 does not work. And these dims do 5100. And I don't think this thing auto-recovers. Also, I checked the motherboard manual for this thing. I can't figure out which jumper on this thing is clear CMOS. So we might have to do this the old-fashioned way and pull the battery. Because, unfortunately, like, the thing is, the manual does talk about clearing the CMOS. They just don't tell you what jumper is the clear CMOS jumper. And there is a 2-pin header, like, down on the bottom edge of the board that I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's the clear CMOS, but I don't know for sure. It might be a temperature sensor or something. Again, boring RAM overclocking. I mean, you missed the VRM testing part. And, like, the VRM testing basically went, whoa, this is bad. This is so bad. And then we moved on to RAM overclocking. Front panel pins. There's no 2-pin by the front panel. There's like a 2-pin that's randomly in the middle of the, like, right here there's 2 pins that I think are clear CMOS, but I'm not sure. And so I'm not gonna short them because, like, I've actually killed motherboards by accidentally shorting the wrong thing, which makes sense, but yeah. So I'm not gonna short a connector that I don't know what it's for. I'm gonna see if they have more information on their website. Oh, I think as part, like, I think to save cost, they don't include the full manual. Which is clever, I guess. Anyway. Oh, yay. Okay, so that is... So it is clear CMOS. It's just that, like, in the manual, it's labeled JCMOS, whereas here it's... Oh, the label is sideways. Okay. Yeah, okay, well... Power down and clear CMOS. Yeah, I know J means jumper, but the thing is, like, it says JCOM right under the 2 pins, and it says JCMOS next to them. Like, the label I thought was for the pins was actually for the connector next to the pins. Oh, wait, this is one of those boards where you need to turn off the power supply and then clear the CMOS, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, it probably is. Oh no, it was booting, damn it. This is why I like boot up LEDs. Because you don't have to sit there wondering, is the board actually doing something or is it stuck? right? Which, like, the beeper, like, tells you at the end of being stuck, hey, I'm stuck. And it's like, yeah, if there was LEDs, I'd know that way sooner. Store setup from profile 1. So I think we're just going to mess with Proc ODT at this point. Now, the problem with messing with Proc ODT is that this is going to stop posting very quickly. I think we're going to start with 32 ohm because it's a 4-layer daisy chain with too many dim slots. I'm assuming it's going to like a low Proc ODT. We're going to go to 4400 initially. Like, I'm just guessing here. I don't have a method. It's just like 4-layer daisy chain motherboard probably likes 32. There's, well, more like I've had a lot of motherboards just generally like 32. And there are some exceptions that really like 40, but there's a lot of boards that like 32. So we're going to try 32. And now we can't tell if it liked that or didn't. Which board's best with 2 DIMMs and which run best with 4 DIMMs? For Ryzen, basically all the motherboards are daisy chained, so they all work best with 2. Did that work? Oh, this time it recovered. Wait, what? Okay, we're gonna go back to 4266. And actually, I'm going to check Zen timings for what the board defaults for Proc ODT. It's probably defaulting to 60. Or, well, I actually have no idea what it's defaulting to. We'll see. Did the capture card decide that it doesn't like the GPU anymore? What the hell? Okay, we're at 42. Take me to Windows. Trying to make 4-DIMM Hynix CJR work on ASRock X570M Pro 4, 3466 CL18 unstable, but 3200 CL14 is fine. I know you said ASRock 4-DIMM board. ASRock board's bad 4-DIMMs. This is a 4-layer daisy chain. What CPU do you have? Like, with a 3000 series, you shouldn't be stuck at, like... Wait, at 3466, what are your other timings like? Well, actually, 1818 should be fine. Yeah, that's a pretty normal CJR bin, 16, 18, 18 at 3466. Okay, this one defaults to 40, okay, that's neat. 18, 20, cool. So... They're using a 5800X, 18, 22, 22, 42. Yeah, I have no idea why that wouldn't work. Because, like, on MSI, on the B450 mortar, I was able to go all the way up to, like, 3800 at, what was it? Well, CL16, I think, with... Admittedly, that was microns. So, I don't know. Maybe I need to test some 4x8 CJR setups on some cheap boards, but... It might, like... The thing is, I don't have a cheap 4-layer ASRock board. Actually, wait, which one do you have again? You have the X570M Pro 4. Is that a 4-layer or is that a... Actually, wait, no, ASRock's like, what I'm wondering is, like, could I use the Steel Legend to, like, get similar... Because the Steel Legend should be similar. Oh, wait a minute. This might be asking a bit much, but can you tell if you have memory traces exposed on your motherboard? Because I don't think I have that topology at all. So I can't, like, give you any... like, anything I try is just going to be on a different motherboard, and the behavior is not going to be the same. Because, like, the Steel Legend has... it, like, it is a 4-layer, but you can't see any of the memory traces on it. Actually... No, drive strengths. 20, 20. No. So this is like how to get big clocks, basically settings that I'm running right now. I'm hoping that makes it clock higher. No, the thing is, like, I don't know if ASRock hasn't revised the PCB. Like, I don't know. Like, if he has a launch X570 Pro 4, then yeah, there's no way I'm able to test how that board behaves. But I don't know, maybe they updated the memory topology and just didn't talk about it. Okay. Bill Wancello, thanks for the 420. I have a tweaker tab. What's wrong with calling it tweaker tab? So, like, that's been, like, Gigabyte has, like, Gigabyte used to have a tab labeled MIT, which was, like... The T was for tweaker. Or some... Wait, was it? I can't remember. But, like, Asus boards have a tweaker's paradise menu. So that's just, like, a normal freaking overclocking term. I don't know what else... I guess they could have called it the overclocking tab. Okay, 40... Let's try 4666. Motherboard intelligent tweaker. Okay, I was right. It is called tweaker. That's actually worse than tweaker. On just calling it tweaker tab. Motherboard intelligent tweaker. Now, the memory topology is entirely dependent on the motherboard. It has nothing to do with the chipset, because the memory controller, believe it or not, is not part of the chipset. It's part of the CPU. I guess, like, the thing is, I don't pay attention to the tab labels in Gigabyte BIOS. At this point. Like, I use that BIOS so much that I don't, like... It's like, it's that other tab with all the menus. Okay, so 4666 still doesn't work. I'm getting the feeling that, like, Biostar was lying about the 4933 support. Because, like, these DIMMs, on, like, even on the A520MH, these will do 4800. And then this board is, like, twice the price of that cheapo Gigabyte board, and I can't even get 4666 to work. Admittedly, this has, you know, twice as many DIMM slots, but... Come on. Do you recommend this for cheap? No. I'm pretty sure at this price point you can get a better motherboard from, like, anybody else. Like, actually, at this price point, I'd rather have a Gigabyte or a... or an MSI or an ASRock or like anyone else. Not Asus, unless you have like different regional pricing compared to what I'm used to. Like, the thing is, I'm not even so much disappointed by the memory performance as I like memory overclocking, because I really wasn't expecting much in that department. I'm more disappointed by the fact that, like, the board overheats with a stock 3950X. Admittedly, I do have an AIO on the stock 3950X, which is not doing the VRM any favors in terms of cooling, but... So yeah, that's kind of the awkward thing, right? Is like if you test VRM temperatures with an AIO, it's going to overheat. If you test with the stock cooler, it's not going to overheat anymore, even if you're running the exact same settings. Because the stock cooler, like, especially the AMD stock cooler, like, that thing absolutely, like, slams the VRM heatsink with airflow on any high core count CPU, because those chips run so damn hot on the stock cooler that, you know, like, it'll like the fan maxes out, and then you get tons of airflow for the VRM, so that the thermals aren't an issue then. And the thing is, like, the feature set on this isn't really that great anyway. The BIOS isn't that great. The memory overclocking isn't that great. Like, I don't really see a reason to get this instead of, like, a Gigabyte or an ASRock or a MSI. B550 or a V2 with, it's not a 12 phase, it's a 6. And I know Gigabyte's website calls it a 12 phase, and I'm like, I'm just so done with that. Wait, so you're getting a Unify X, and then you want to know the sweet spot megahertz and CL. Like, how, like, I don't get the question. It's like you're buying a motherboard geared completely towards extreme memory overclocking. And then you're asking, what is the sweet spot memory in terms of CL and megahertz? Which is like, you can't possibly be referring to overclocked memory settings, because there's no sweet spot. You just keep raising the settings until they don't go any higher. So you must be referring to XMP, in which case, why on earth are you buying a Unify X? Like, if you're overclocking, you just buy the highest binned B-die memory kit you can afford. And if you're not overclocking, you don't buy a Unify X. Like, and I say that as somebody who likes the Unify X, but it's just like, don't, like, it's the people who buy dark boards to run them at XMP. So now we have people buying Unify X boards to run them at XMP, so nothing ever changes. You use Dark Reader. I don't use dark mode in anything. I'm honestly kind of annoyed that the live stream thing in YouTube is dark mode. Because I use YouTube, like, I use basically, well, actually, no. It's like, I don't really care what mode stuff is in. So I just use it in whatever mode it defaults to when I install it. So it's like, I use YouTube light mode because that's default YouTube. I use Discord dark mode because that's default Discord. I use the dark mode in the live streaming setting, like live streaming configurator for YouTube, because that's the default. When Twitch switched from default light mode to default dark mode, I was like, that's annoying. But I was annoyed not because I actually care about what mode it's in. I was annoyed because the color changed. It's like, it was white before and now it's gray. Why is it gray? So basically, I don't care. Sold my 1080 Ti the other day to a guy with a stock 1700 on an A320. The A320 motherboard isn't as much of a problem as the single 16 gig stick of RAM and the stock 1700. Like, you could probably get pretty decent performance out of that motherboard, but not with that CPU and one stick of RAM. Is it possible to recover a corrupted BIOS without BIOS flashback functionality? Yeah, you basically have to connect a external BIOS flasher. And I've never done that myself because I've never needed to. So, I don't know how to do that. But you can definitely, like, you just need to get some kind of, like, I think the Elmore EVC2 supports BIOS flashing. So, yeah, and I think the Elmore EVC2 even has, like, the connector that they use for motherboard, like, that motherboards have for programming the BIOS at the factory. Like, I think the EVC2 comes with it, maybe. You should check, like, so that's an option, and yeah, like, you can flash the BIOS externally with other devices if the motherboard doesn't have its own BIOS flashback functionality. Okay, so, let's do the sketchy thing and tip the motherboard, because I actually want to check out the power loss in the power plane instead of, like, all the way from point A to point B. Actually, no, we can leave that plugged in. There we go. Now I can get measurements. So fun fact, I have this GT1030 very specifically for this kind of application because it's one of the cheapest cards that has the clip for the PCIe slot. That also isn't like, because I also needed it to be a relatively light card, so it couldn't have a massive like heatsink on it. So that was another criteria for that. So I could do sketchy things like this. Well, okay, you guys can see it now. There we go. I need 64 gigs of RAM. Run 2x32. 2x32 is way easier to work with. Can't remember which way the caps were. Can't even see them in the motherboard photos. Okay, the top leg is ground, so that for me is the bottom leg. Okay, so that's voltage. Cool. Go. So I can't forget which side of the multi-layer ceramic I'm supposed to be measuring. Put it in voltage mode. Actually, I want millivolts, I think. And nah, voltage. Oh, volts. I answered the super chat. Anyway, let's... right, I need to plug in the 8-pin, don't I? Oh no, that's plugged in. Okay. Fires right up. I mean, why wouldn't it? Please take a colorful X570. I've considered it, but... like... what? Oh, I unplugged it. What settings is this on right now? Man, there's not enough space on this freaking desk. Also, my voice has decided that it's going to give up right now, which is really exactly what I needed. Thanks, Elia, for the 100 rubles, I think. My EDI 3000 CL15 on Asus Prime Z370A can't go higher than 3200 with timing set to auto under any voltage. Did I lose Silicon Lottery? No, the auto timings are probably wrong. Also, are you using the correct DIMM slots? Anyway. Like, try set it to like 18, 22, 22 or something, and then see how far you can push it. It's on auto right now. We don't want it to be on auto. I want it static. Yeah, we're just going to be testing in Cinebench, so actually we can go all the way up to like 1.35. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. No. There. Okay. Oh, that's the whole hardware info. Well, that's fine. Damn. That's one garbage power plane. So, as you just saw, when Cinebench fires up, right, it drops 130 millivolts from the nearest capacitor to the socket. From the furthest capacitor, it drops 177. So we're losing like 20, 30 millivolts through the socket, and the rest of it is entirely just the power plane. And right now we're pulling... How much are we pulling? We're pulling around 140 amps-ish. Which means this thing is producing So we're losing 130 millivolts. So 0.3 times 140 amps. We're losing. This thing makes 20 watts of heat in the power plane. Okay, like the board itself, not the VRM, not the power stages, not the inductors. The PCB itself produces 20 watts of heat. Well, now it's no wonder that the VRM runs hot as hell, even though it's on 90 amp smart power stages. It's like that's really bad. That's bad. That's like really, really bad. Well, assuming that current reading is accurate, which it should be, because like this is on smart power stages. All of the CPU readings here are technically supposed to be directly from the controller. So unless Biostar is doing something in their BIOS that's like tweaking what the controller is reporting to the CPU, we should be getting an accurate current reading. And so it pulls 140 amps and drops 130 to 170 millivolts. So, oh my god, the power plane is on fire. Also, the voltage the voltage regulation because of that has to be trash. Right? Like you saw how like every time the Cinebench started up, right? The voltage, like the difference between the 2 points I was measuring went from like no voltage difference to 130 millivolts. And I don't think we're drooping. Like the thing is, we're not even drooping that much, right? Because we have 75 millivolts of droop, but the power plane is off by 130 millivolts. So there should be like 75 millivolts of overshoot just due to the power plane, like without factoring in the factoring in like the load release effect on the inductors. Like the power plane alone is just like, because the thing is, right, when load release occurs, the VRM is supposed to, I want to draw this. We're gonna pull up paint. Where's paint? Because I want to draw this, because I don't think I'm doing a great job of explaining it. Why do I not have paint pinned? I guess we could use... we'll just use GIMP. So, basically, what I'm trying to say, where is it? Is this the one? Yes, this is the one. Okay, so, so basically, we have a, you know what, we're gonna draw a blob, and the blob is the VRM. Right, so there's our VRM. Then we have the power plane. Power plane, and there's also a ground plane, which I didn't check how much ground voltage loss there is. I don't really, like, considering how much the power plane is dropping, we don't have to worry about the ground. Actually, the ground shouldn't be as bad because there should just be like a solid ground fill somewhere. But anyway, and then you have your CPU, right? Also, so you have your CPU, and we want, so my voltage settings are currently like 1.3 volts set. No, 1.35 set. So we have set voltage of 1.35. That on, so idle we get, because we have V-droop running, right? So we get idle 1.35. Load we get 1.275. So that's a 75 millivolt voltage drop, right? Now the problem is, though, that our power plane here at load drops a, like, so at 0 amps, what the hell? At 0 amps, we get 0 volts, 0 millivolts voltage loss, right, across the power plane. At, so that would be like idle. So like idle, not actually idle, because idle isn't 0 amps, it's like 5 or something. Anyway, then you have at 140 amps, we seem to be getting, according to like that voltage, that readings from the VRM, but we get about 130 millivolts of voltage drop, right, across our power plane. So the problem with this is if the CPU, so at idle we're at 1.35 and the VRM is outputting 1.35 because there's no difference between the voltages. Now at 1.275 on the CPU, right, the VRM, like right here, we're going to be getting 1.275 plus this, okay, which is going to be 1.4. Which is kind of in line with some of the earlier measurements I took. It was over 1.4 volts coming off of the inductors. So you're going to have 1.4 volts here. So if you look at your, different graphs, you have, well, we have time here, right? And then we're going to have a line for the, so we're going to have current down here. Current. And this is why you want, like, does anybody actually cares? And I care. It's all that matters. So we have current, we have CPU volts, and we have VRM volts. And so what ends up happening is you have, like, low current, right? Then Cinebench does its thing, and then Cinebench stops, and then Cinebench goes back up. Anyway, so it cycles like that. So CPU voltage does something like this, right? Which is what we set. Like, we want V-droop here. Except what actually happens is you get this at the end of that. Because what happens with our VRM voltage is our VRM does that, right? Like, that's what our output voltage at the VRM does. So we get 1.35 here. We got 1.4 something there. We got 1.275 here. And we got 1.35 at the start of the load. So what happens when the current draw drops, right? Our CPU voltage rushes towards the output voltage of the VRM. And that's before you factor in the fact that there's still energy stuck in the inductors that needs to go somewhere. Because normally what actually, like, this is like if the VRM didn't have the whole inductor side of things going on. If you include what happens with the inductors, you actually get an extra, like, spike on top of that. Because the VRM needs to unload, and you get something like that. So this would be even taller in actuality. And this is why you want a good power plane. This is why having a crappy this is why having a crappy e-power connection screws over your overclocking, because you get massive upward voltage spikes on load release because you have a bunch of capacitors sitting at much higher voltage than what you're supposed to be running, connected to your CPU. So as soon as the current draw disappears, it's like, well, there's like a 1.5 volt capacitor bank connected directly to your CPU now. So yeah, this power plane is, like, awful. Like, I don't, it would be really cool to look at this on an oscilloscope, like, before and after, but this is why you don't want a power plane where you need to output way more voltage than what you're getting. Because one of the ideas with load line calibration is that your load line calibration is supposed to be equal to the resistance of the power plane. Because that way, right, if your load line calibration is equal, so your V-droop is equal to the power plane resistance, so for this scenario, so here we have 75 millivolts of V-droop. If we had 130 millivolts of V-droop, right, 130, then everything's fine, because we would get our VRM output voltage would be flat, and our CPU voltage would look like this, which, yeah, our minimum voltage would be way lower, so now that could cause instability as well, but you wouldn't get that big voltage overshoot at the end. Which actually, like, this isn't a concern for stability. The problem this creates is, imagine if instead of going back to steady state, we immediately started up another workload, right? And the VRM is like, oh my god, I just overshot the voltage by, like, whatever, and it's desperately... And so if you have a really inconsistent workload, and your power plane has a bunch of resistance, then your voltage regulation just becomes a horrible mess. And that's why low-end 4-layer PCB is bad. That's also part of it. Like, even if you have top of the line, like you have a top of the line controller, great power stages, great inductors, great capacitors, and then your power plane just doesn't do its job, your voltage regulation still ends up terrible. That's part of the reason why a lot of like high-end GPUs try to cram the voltage regulator right on top of the GPU core, because you really don't want to have a massive difference between your bulk capacitance and like the voltage at the bulk capacitors relative to the voltage at the core. Anyway, back to testing, because yeah, board sucks. Actually, I don't know what to test at this point. I guess we could try mess around with 4 memory sticks instead of just 2. Can a bad power plane potentially kill your CPU? Well, the thing is, it's not so... Well, technically, yes. Like, technically, yes, but... There's, like... Yes, asterisk. There's a whole bunch of details that also have to align. Because the power plane on its own isn't... Like, won't destroy your motherboard... Like, won't destroy your CPU. But if you combine, like, a terrible power plane with really... Like, already really high voltages... and then combine that with, let's say, like high voltages, very shallow load line calibration, so like no V-droop, and a terrible power plane, then you're, like, depending on how much overshoot that leads to, yeah, it'll crater the CPU eventually. Okay, we're gonna run 4 DIMMs of Samsung B-Die because that's the hardest thing to run. Anyway, let's shut this thing down. I'm gonna set it back up in test bench mode. The thing is, voltage spikes aren't good for the CPU, but it depends how tall they are, because they happen like, your load release voltage spike happens specifically when the CPU is pulling the least current. So it's not like it's going to cause a ton of electromigration. But what it can do if it gets tall enough is it can start damaging things like the gate, like the insulation layers inside the CPU. So like the gate oxide and stuff. But that normally happens at, like, ridiculously high voltages. So most of the time you don't have to worry about that. The other concern is, like, if your VRM is, like, because the thing is, you also have to factor in the fact that the voltage controller sees the voltage at the CPU, and it's doing its very, and like, what it's trying to do is maintain the voltage at whatever settings you set it to, right? So if you say to the voltage controller, hey, I want 1.35 volts, and, you know, there's also the V-droop there to, like, not have the voltage controller fight it too much, but, like, the thing is, if the voltage shoots up 75 millivolts above what the voltage controller is aiming for, it'll suddenly start doing things to try bring the voltage back down. And if you now have another workload start up immediately, right, then, well, your voltage, like your VRM's potentially completely turned off at this point, because it's desperately trying to, you know, get rid of the excess energy that's in the inductors and capacitors, and then your CPU suddenly goes like, yeah, I want 100 amps, please, thank you very much. And now the voltage just, like, falls way, way faster than it was supposed to. So the whole thing gets really unstable, because, you know, the controller... Because the controller lags behind whatever is happening with the VRM a bit. What lags behind whatever is happening with the voltage at the CPU. And so you really, Like that's why as you increase load line calibration on any motherboard, the voltage regulation gets worse and worse and worse. Like your undershoot gets worse, your overshoot gets worse. And it only really, like, you only really see that if you're running a workload that's really inconsistent. Because if you run a workload that isn't super spiky, like if you have a nice, clean, say, like load simulator type workload where it literally goes, I pull 100 amps, then I pull 10 amps, then I pull 100 amps, then yeah, you're not really going to see like massive increases in undershoot, even if your load line calibration is a bit off. But if you have a workload which is constantly, like, say, what I use on Intel CPUs, which is the Prime 95 120, like, well, there's a couple different flavors of the FFTs that work, but there's like 96K, 116K, 128K, and 192K FFT sizes. Those constantly go in and out of full load. And so they make, like, so a VRM that in something like Cinebench you get like 100 millivolts peak to peak. You run something like 128K or 192K and you get 300. Because now instead of just dealing with the fact that, okay, there's like one load release event every couple milliseconds, you just have the CPU constantly going between pulling like every couple clock cycles, the CPU is demanding drastically different amounts of current, and the VRM is having a very, very hard time trying to keep up with that. And if your power plane is like screwing that even further, then it's just like, yeah, that's not good. It's not good at all. So, anyway. This is attached now, so we can put the system back down. So theoretically, having a better power plane can lead to somewhat better overclocking in terms of like the minimum voltage necessary to achieve stability. Oh, it's worth noting I've not checked all of my different AM4 motherboards for how much voltage loss they have on the power plane, so I'm not sure that like how this compares, but actually no, I think like on the Gigabyte X570 Extreme, the difference between, I think I checked that one. I think that board's somewhere in like the 50 millivolt range, and then yeah, something like that. Anyway, actually, I could go check. Like, this is a relatively easy, non-intrusive measurement to take, so I wouldn't actually mind doing it for a bunch of my boards. Because I think I might have measured it a couple times, but I don't think I ever, like, I've not made a nice, boring spreadsheet out of it. That's the issue. I don't have a nice spreadsheet detailing all the different boards and how well they do in terms of power delivery. And I guess I could make that. That could be kind of neat to have. Maybe make a very boring spreadsheet video out of it. It's gonna get 1,000 views. Anyway. Because again, it's like, why would you make a graph of the different power plane voltage drops? Like, doesn't make sense to me. It's not the point. Where's my other Patriots? Oh, there they are. It's not going to be 1.5 hours long. It's going to be a couple minutes. I really wish I had an oscilloscope. Actually, Now that I think of it, like I have a 5950X. The 5950X pulls similar amounts of powers to the 3950X. I could actually turn my 3950X into a probinator. Actually, I shouldn't do that simply because I still have the 10700K probinator and I still haven't like done all the testing I was supposed to do with that. And like I am awful. I am just straight up awful. And again, instead of, you know, test like, oh, whatever. I have, well, Z590 is coming up. I'm going to do probinator measure. I'm going to probinate my Z490 boards. Actually, I'm not leaving for Christmas. So it's not, well, no, I should still rush because it's like, but I'll get probinator measurements this month. Yeah, let's say this month. For reasons that I'm not going to talk about. How many Z490 boards do I have again? I have the Extreme, that needs to get probinated. I have the Master, that needs to get probinated. I have the Apex, that definitely needs to get probinated. I have the Vision, definitely worth doing, and I have the Unify. I think I'll do the Unify, Master, and Apex first, and then I'll do the Extreme and the Vision later, because Unify, Apex, and Master are sort of like the top Z490 boards in my opinion. And I really actually want to know, it's like, well, I really, like, the Unify, I want to know the Unify because the capacitor configuration on that thing looks super sketch. Like, there's no caps behind the socket, which is like, that can't work. Can't possibly work. And then there's the Apex and the Master where it's like, well, I don't think the Apex, well, I don't think the Master and the Extreme are going to perform that differently. And then the Apex is just like, well, you need to compare against the Apex. It's the freaking Apex. That's like the point. I'll be happy if this runs 3614. Oh, it's turned off. Why isn't the EVGA Z490 Dark at the top? The top of what? Oh, top Z490 boards. The thing is, I don't have one, so I can't test it. So it wasn't that I don't consider the Z490 Dark a top motherboard, it's just kind of like, well, I can't measure one, so pointless to mention it when it's like, motherboards I want to measure and can measure, not the Dark, don't have one. I wish I could measure it. Actually, we'll leave the 4. I'm gonna start at 3200. I don't trust this board. Oh, wait, I forgot to blow up the BIOS. Eh, 1.3. Is that everything? Yeah, that's basically everything. Yeah, that's everything. Hey BZ, is there a secret to get my XMP from Ryzen G-Skill 3800 CL14 to run XMP on X570E Asus? That should just work, but with the current state of the Ryzen 5000 BIOSes, it might just take like a month before you get a BIOS where that works properly. Because, like, really, that should just work. Especially if it's an XMP, like, it really should just work. But knowing, like, there are certain BIOSes for the Ryzen 3000 series which are completely unusable for memory overclocking. And so, you know, there's a good chance that a lot of the BIOSes available for the motherboards right now, depending on which vendor you have, like, they just don't work. And you're just going to have to wait for them to fix it. Can you run at least 3600? Running Rev E dual rank. Don't really have any tips. Rev E has been a memory chip I've always struggled with stabilizing. Like, it does good settings, but getting it to, like, stop erroring memtest is, like, not a thing I'm good at. Just be like 1050. Oh, wait, there was one other thing I wanted to change. Where are they? How am I not able to find them again? I forgot where the global C states are. Oh, they're in here. Ah. That's not really Biostar's fault. That's my fault. Like, not knowing where a setting is very much is the user's fault, not the vendor's fault. I wonder how well this motherboard would do for APU. Actually, it would probably suck for APU overclocking as well. I'm just 16. Okay, definitely my least favorite thing about this board is the lack of troubleshooting LEDs. That's the biggest problem. I have no idea. Like, it probably is stuck, but there's no way to tell. Actually, if you use the RGB Ryzen coolers, you can tell from the fan ramping up and down. Like, if the board is doing something or if it just got stuck. go. There's my debug heatsink. Yeah, it looks pretty stuck right now. Yeah, because it ramps up and down depending on what part of the post procedure it's in. So if you just look at the RPM, you can kind of tell if you're stuck or not. At least with gigabyte boards that works. I don't know how well it'll work on this thing. I'm hoping it works. No fan on the VR. What do you think this is? It's a little baby fan for the little baby VRM. Also because this little baby fan fits perfectly between the AIO and the IO cover. Yeah, no, that fan just maxed out the whole time. So, unfortunately, the debug fan idea does not work on this motherboard. Which is a real shame. Yeah, any board with RGB should cycle the RGB for indicating error codes. But, you know, that would require innovation. It's like, you already have color-coded LEDs all over the motherboard. Just use them for indicating something useful. This is RGB. This right here. They could have used this for troubleshooting LEDs, but nope. Now, 3614 seemed to work just fine, so... Which is roughly what I'd expect from a 4-layer daisy chain motherboard, so... Yeah, I don't really see that as a big problem. Okay, no, you can see the fan like ramp up and down when the board isn't just insta-jammed. I guess that the going straight to full speed is like the equivalent of an F9 code. Yeah, like you can see it cycling. So I guess it was just F9ing, which is why it wasn't progressing at all. The board is 130 to 140, is it? If it is, yeah, don't buy it. Absolutely, at 140 bucks, this is like, no. In the UK, it's 112 quid. Which is still too much. Or actually, is it too much? No, well... It's fine if you use a 6-core. Or an 8-core. Actually, I'm not sure it would be fine with an 8-core. But definitely, it's definitely fine with a 6. It's going to be mostly okay with an 8. It is absolutely not okay with anything with more than 8. Like 12-core or 16... This thing will overheat at stock. And it doesn't take a lot of time to overheat. Like, it overheats in a couple minutes at stock settings. Like, nope. Terrible board. Okay, let's run some, like, Geekbench on this. Sure, we could probably do that. No. And we're going to leave that enabled. Oh, screen. Yeah. I'm too interested in testing the motherboard. Sorry for ruining the stream. Okay, well, here's the memory settings that I punched in. Right, it's just like Buildzoid's standardized B-die timings. 40, 4, 4, 16, 4, 8, 10, 4, 4, 280, 14, 10. Which really, TCWL just has to be equal to TCL. And then, like, well, these are specific, like, the primaries and the TCWL are specific to your memory kit, but the rest of it is just, like, every single B-die kit I have, I run 40, 4, 4, 16, 4, 8, 10, 4, 4, 280, or 300, depending on how lazy I'm feeling. And then TCKE1, and that's it. And then power down you should disable, and gear down you should enable. Well, gear down makes your life easier if it's enabled. Can you LN2 VRMs as well? Yes, but it can cause a lot of problems if you run your power delivery sub-zero. Wait, this has a clock gen? But it only goes to 107 megahertz. Oh boy. Does it? Like, the funny thing about this clock gen is that the stock clock gen that comes in the CPU goes to 118. So, they made it more granular, but they also made it stop at a lower frequency. Which is well, the granularity is admittedly more useful than having a really high max BCLK, but yeah, you're not going to break any memory frequency world records on this board. I really wonder if I can actually fix the VRM thermals. Because if I can fix those, this board could be a lot more interesting. It still won't be the greatest memory overclocker ever made, but... Summary, yeah, bad Mobo. I don't know why anybody thought the Mobo would be good. It's a cheap Biostar M80X. And I mostly bought it because I saw a bunch of reviews that were like, oh yeah, this is bad. And I was like, ooh, I wonder how bad. Bad. Not the worst motherboard I've ever used, but bad. I think the Unify X is stuck in like has like shipping issues. Because I think it's already available in some regions of the world and just not all of them. Actually, no, we don't want hardware info. We just want to run some IDA and some Geekbench. Which Geekbench is probably not going to pass at 4.4. Yeah, Geekbench is definitely not going to pass at 4.4. You bought an M80X board? You feeling okay? Yeah, I feel fine. I've had M80X boards in the past. For review purposes, not for I want an M80X board reason. So 65 nanoseconds, which is like, okay, well, for these settings, that's what you'd expect. Do you think next year there will be MOBOs with DDR5? Probably towards the end of the year and for a high-end desktop platform. Maybe like Threadripper or something. Oh, in Germany, UniFi-X is available. Awesome. So, yeah, it looks like it's finally getting places. So, Geekbench not running at 4.4 is like, okay, well, that's not surprising. So, we're going to go back to 4.2 and see if we can finish Geekbench. You can already have 1 terabyte of RAM in 4 sticks of DDR4. You can, I'm pretty sure you can buy a 256 gig registered DDR4 memory stick. You can definitely get 128 gig DDR4 memory sticks. Oh no, why aren't you responding? There we go. Let's run some Geekbench. Nah, that didn't. No, that isn't a dead Windows install. Dead Windows install is when it goes through the whole repair process and it still keeps blue screening. Like, I've actually only ever killed one Windows 10 OS completely to the point where you just couldn't boot at all. And running, like, the repair utility would tell you, like, yeah, there's issues and we don't know how to fix them. Which was like, you gotta be kidding me. What's the freaking repair utility for if it can't fix my OS? No, it didn't repair anything. Like, I just restarted it. Like, the thing is, Windows pretty much trips Windows, like, automatically trips the repair functionality, and when that happens, you just kind of tell it, like, you just have to tell it that there's nothing to repair and then skip back into Windows. Like, because it basically triggers your system needs a repair message if you just crash for no reason. Because normally, you shouldn't be crashing for no reason. Right? Normally that would indicate a software problem, unless you're an overclocker, in which case it's probably a hardware problem, which Windows can't do anything about. And it scores like you'd expect it to score, 8500. So, I guess I can try inch the frequency up a bit. Maybe it'll do 3666. But there's no way it's doing 3800. Well, actually, I don't know if I can do 1900 FCLK on this board with this chip, so we're going to try 3800 on the memory without 1900 FCLK. Which still, it's like if the board doesn't do 1900 FCLK, it's a bad board. Because this chip, like every single one of my Ryzen 3000 series CPUs does 1900 FCLK. Now, some of them need a little bit more work to do it than others, but that's where, like, the motherboard comes in. On a good motherboard, all of them do 1900. On a bad motherboard, only some of them do. Anyway, let's try 3666 desynced. So this is more like a memory topology test than it is a... Like, because being able to boot 3800 at all is, like, pretty good for 4 memory sticks on a daisy chain. Especially with 4 layers, that's actually really good. Like, if you have a 6-layer board, this should just work. But on a 4-layer board, I'd be, like, that's impressive. Like, B450 4-layer motherboards, 3800, CL14 on 4 sticks. B-die, no. On other memory chips, yes, but on B-die, no. So this board, like, it's not terrible, but there's no reason I can think of that you'd want to buy this. Like, I can get the same feature set, actually, I can get a better feature set for a similar price with better power delivery from, like, anybody else. So, yeah, I don't know why I'd get this instead of a Gigabyte or an ASRock or an MSI or an Asus. Actually, no, Asus at this price point kind of sucks, but, yeah. I can do 2000 FCLK, but not 1900. That's weird. That's really weird. This seems to actually do a good job of memory overclocking. Like, that's not bad at all. Like, for 4 memory sticks? Actually, well... Yeah, no, that's not bad at all. Let's see if 3866 works. Like, I'm surprised that a daisy chain can boot this. The C6H is a 6-layer. And a T topology. So for 4x8, that's like optimal. What board for 2000 FCLK? As far as I know, it's mostly a BIOS thing. I've seen the Crosshair 8 Dark Hero do 2000 FCLK. I've also seen some Gigabyte boards on certain BIOSes do 2000 FC. Actually, I think basically any Gigabyte board, but with very specific BIOSes, will do 2000 FCLK. 4x8, what's the max you have done? I think I did 4533 on a Z390. Unless you mean max on Ryzen, in which case... 4,000? Maybe? I don't know, I've not really pushed 4x8. Generally not worth doing. B550 Aorus Pro V2 decent for 4x8 overclocking, yes. It's a 6-layer board. It's one of the best it's probably one of the best memory overclocking motherboards at that price point. If not the best memory overclocking motherboard at that price point. Would I benefit having 2000 FCLK with 3600 mem over auto FCLK? That should be faster for some workloads. But why can't your RAM do 4000? And what RAM do you have and what board? Also, like 2000 FCLK is also super hard to stabilize from what I've heard. Like, I've not done it because I've just not been keeping up with the BIOS updates for 5000 series right now, because basically, well, the current state of the BIOSes is terrible, so I'm just kind of like, I'm going to wait for AMD to put out an AGSA that isn't a pile of trash, and then I'm going to start figuring out how to do stuff. Because, like, if I figure out how to do if I figure out how to do 4000 CL16 with 2000 FCLK on a BIOS that then gets scrapped because it's unstable or something, you know, like, pointless. Waste of my time. Oh no, I wanted to clear the CMOS, damn it. 3600 CL18 Nanya memory. Board is X570E Strix. Yeah, I've not worked with any Nanya memory at all. I wanted to buy some recently on eBay, but I blew the budget on more GPUs. I thought FCLK was CPU dependent. It's so like it also depends on your CPU, but it also depends on the BIOS. Like no one thing is entirely one variable dependent. Okay, unless well no, like it isn't. Like there's nothing is ever as simple like there's no like I don't like any clock speed is going to be a factor of multiple things. With maybe the exception of well, no, even BCLK, like max BCLK varies by motherboard. Like, I can't think of a single frequency that isn't dependent on multiple factors. Any interesting GPU reviews, discoveries coming? I picked up a GTX 780 Lightning with a water block, which is actually not what, like, I didn't want the water block, but it was cheap. And I did want a 780 Lightning. Mostly because I have a collection of Lightning cards. At this point, I think I have a 6970 Lightning, I have a 7970 Lightning, I have a 680 Lightning, 770 Lightning, 780 Lightning, 980 Ti Lightning, and I also have a 290X Lightning. So now, oh, I have a dead 5870 Lightning, and I have a dead 580 Lightning. So now I just need to get a working 580 Lightning, and a working 480 Lightning, and a working 5870 Lightning. And I have like the complete Lightning collection that I care about. Technically, I think there's also like the GTX 280 or something Lightning, but that's too old. So that doesn't like yes, it's a Lightning. Yes, it's cool. It's too old though. I'm like there needs to be boundaries on how many freaking cards I'm willing to pick up. So 5000 series and 400 series is where I bottom out. On well, like that's the oldest cards I take, with the exception of 4870X2s and 485X2s. I almost picked up a 485X2, almost, because it was broken, and I was like, do I really want to spend a bunch of money on a broken 485X2? I might be able to repair it, but if only there is a 6900 XT Lightning. Honestly, like, the main thing with a 6900 XT, in my opinion, is that we need a card that has higher clock speed limits. Like, it's gotten to the point that I've considered, like, what I've been wondering is, like, so similar to how you have BCLK, right, on a motherboard, there's got to be a BCLK on a GPU. Like, GPU's got to have some kind of BCLK type thing. So, maybe you could get, like, a GPU, like you could have like a Lightning or a Matrix or a you know, some like super overclocking focused custom card that has a clock gen that allows you to go past the 3 gigahertz core clock limit and also past the 2140 megahertz, well, 2150 megahertz memory limit on the 6900 XT and 6800 XT. Like that, if there was any vendor that did that, I'd be happy to pay like $200 extra to get something like that on my GPU. But no. Like, I wonder if you could just like replace the crystal on the card? Well, that sounds like a great way to just have a card that doesn't work. Actually, we're going to leave that auto. And you try messing with the BCLK on this board. There's no point. Like, we could mess with it, but I don't see a point in doing that. Yeah, okay, at this point we're going to go to 42. Oh, 280's fine. Able, and that should be everything. As far as I know, you can't mod the BIOS on the 6000 series. Yeah, since the R9 Fury, AMD GPU overclocking has just been downhill nonstop. I actually have a video coming. Well, I have a rant coming up. I'll probably upload it tomorrow or something, where it's basically just me complaining about AMD's stupid clock speed limits on the 6000 series and how the 7000 series and 200 series were better because they were. And oh yeah, that video is 30 minutes because of course it's 30 minutes. And it's not booting anymore. And I'm bored. I'm bored of this board. This board's not good. There's not much else to it at this point. Like, it's not as bad as it could have been, but it's... Like, I'm not impressed. Especially not impressed by the VRM. Like, they used 6 90-amp smart power stages, and they produced a VRM that overheats at bloody stock settings. Like, at stock. Admittedly with no airflow, but freaking stock. So... Did you enable gear down mode? Yes. Gear down mode is for extra stability. It makes your life so much easier to just overclock with gear down mode. Who would buy a blower 3090 except to replace with a water block? Rendering farms? Like if you have just like a small render box somewhere under a desk, ideally in a room that you're not also in with, like in a separate room, then yeah, you blower cards, 4 of them. Perfect for that kind of thing. The VRM, no, getting control of the VRM on a 6900 XT is easy. The problem is AMD's stupid driver restricting you to 3 gigahertz and 2150 on the memory. So, yeah, anyway. Actually, you know what? Let's go through my collection of inductors to see if I have anything that like comfortably fits onto this. Let's take the board apart. Totally not padding for content. So vault mods aren't hard? Well, I don't consider vault mods difficult. Like vault mods are fine. Like I would rather like at this point NVIDIA GPUs are better at overclocking because on NVIDIA GPUs you just have to mod the power limit and maybe, depending on what card you have, do a lot of modding for voltage controls and switching frequency and stuff. On AMD, it's like, well, you can get voltage control just by connecting a controller to the, like, something to control the voltage controllers with. So like an EVC2 or a USB 005. But that won't help you because even if you raise the voltage, you're going to just hit the clock speed limit, which is like, Like, I'd rather have locked voltage and unlocked clock speeds than locked clock speeds and unlocked voltage. Because voltage is never, like, voltage can always be modified. One way or another, you can mod the voltage control. The freaking clock speed settings? No. I don't know how, well, maybe you could replace a crystal, like, because there is technically a crystal oscillator, like, right next to the GPU core on basically every GPU. And so maybe you could just replace that, and that would give you a higher base clock and probably make the card not boot and maybe screw up like signaling timings and stuff for like your monitor. I don't know. But maybe if you could replace that's kind of the thing is like I don't know of a physical workaround for a clock speed limit. Whereas for voltages, it's like you can always just mod the voltage controller. Sometimes it's really sketchy the way it's done, and it's like not the correct way. But it'll, you know, hopefully it'll survive at least the session that you need it for. Whereas with the software, with the clock speed limits, it's just like, well, now I can't do anything about that. I don't know how to mod AMD's bloody drivers. Like the thing is the video goes into way more depth. I don't need to go into this on this stream. So or more like I don't feel like going on into it on this stream. Like I don't well, no, I'm not going to get into it. Like it's just dumb. AMD's dumb. I'm buying a 3090 because AMD's dumb. I'm serious about that. I am buying a 3090. Or more like, it's not even AMD's dumb, it's just the Radeon division is dumb. Man, I have like random pile, like I have a literal stack of memory on my desk. Wait a minute, how many? Yeah, just literally, well, it's not a stack, it's a pile of memory because it keeps falling over if I tried to stack them. Oh no, nope. We want to take the heatsink off first. Like, I skipped the 5000 series because the 5000 series, like, after Vega, I was like, oh, the overclocking on Vega was already kind of awful. And then 5000 series, I just straight up skipped it because it's like, one, it wasn't competitive. Two, it didn't seem like they did anything to make the overclocking any better. And now we get the 6000 series where it's like, so they somehow managed to make it even worse. It's like, are you kidding me, guys? Oh, this is what I get for using Arctic thermal paste. It's really sticky. Oh, it didn't take the CPU with it. That felt like it would take the CPU with it. Performance-wise, the 5700 XT was kind of okay. I hate 24 pins so much. I can't wait for the 12 volt only standard. And how it's never going to be adopted by DIY. The 24 pin is such an awful connector. Like, honestly, it would have been so much better if it was like a 12 and a 12 pin. Like two little 12 pins next to each other with completely separate cables. Would have been a way better way of doing it, because like it's, well, actually even plugging it in is like annoying, but pulling it out, oh my god, it always feels like I'm gonna break the board. Um, okay. Let's take off the plastic airflow restrictor. Yeah, so here you can sort of, okay, you guys can't see anything, but so as you can see, like instead of having a power plane from where the VRM is, which is right here, so this is the VRM heatsink, that's the VRM. So instead of having a power plane go, you know, like from here to here, we just kind of have nothing. On the front, the power plane ends right at these capacitors, right? Like it ends because there's a bunch of traces that run around here. So I'm pretty sure the power plane probably, like there's, like the power plane goes down into one layer right in this area. It's just one layer here. Because there's ground also. There, like, basically there should be a ground fill going through the whole board. So yeah, that's probably why this thing loses 130 millivolts going from here, from this capacitor, to here. Which is like, so 130 millivolts voltage drop. And this is the thing, like, actually, did I? So from here to there, there's like 130 millivolts voltage drop. From here to there is 180. So, yeah. And this is the thing, like, sometimes I get, like, well, it used to be a pretty regular occurrence for me to see people, like, show up on my, show up in the comments of my videos, going like, there's no way there's 100 amps going through a PCB this skinny. It's like, no, there is 100 amps going through a PCB this thin. There's also, like, 20 watts of heat being produced by those 100 amps going through a PCB this thick. So that's kind of the thing, is like, yeah, you wouldn't have a, like, you wouldn't build a, like, you wouldn't have wiring with this much voltage loss for any, like, real world application, because your wires would just heat up and melt. And I just got thermal paste all over me. I should have wiped off the CPU. You know what? I will wipe the CPU. Also this. Yeah, that seems to be fresh coming, because it's coming off. Oh, man. I always feel bad about wiping off fresh thermal paste. It's like, that's one application of thermal paste that got like 3 hours of use. Unfortunately, the graphite pads are just garbage, so yeah. Like, even a cheap thermal paste is just way, way better than graphite pads, so can't really do much about that. And this is not the right size. Oops. I really don't like these rear I/O covers. A lot of them have really sharp edges. Admittedly, like, the legs of a lot of the rear I/O ports are also really sharp, but, well, just generally the rear I/O end of motherboards is terrible. It's super sharp. There's always something that, like, you grab the motherboard by the rear I/O and then you take your hand off and it's like, oh, where did all the blood come from? So, how does this come apart? Ah. Oh, there's more screws. Okay, this is not the worst way I've seen this done. There's other boards that are much harder to take apart than this. Oh, wait, I just went through the plastic. I was like, why is the screw so hard to get into? Oh, because... Oh, no, wait. No. Yeah, no, the screw's bare. It's just oh, the plastic went over the screw. Okay. Oh. There we go. Actually, I don't have to worry about keeping this motherboard mint at all, because it's like, I plan to replace the inductors on this thing. It's never going back anywhere. There we go. It's like, yeah, I'm going to be replacing the inductors. Worries about, like, not getting fingerprints on stuff. I was like, won't make a difference once we replace the inductors. Okay, you know what? I need to clean up some of the screws on my desk. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I've sort of disassembled and then left in some state of not quite rebuilt yet. So I have a bunch of loose screws on my desk and actually becoming a bit of an issue. Oh wait, I just undid the heatsink without undoing those. Where'd my sockets go? Well, that's a problem. I guess we're gonna do this the sketchier way. Oh, and these are probably self-tapping. Oh no, they're not. Awesome. Well, so it's nice that they have brass inserts, but it's like... Brass inserts do not make your motherboard better. Like, having brass inserts in your plastic I/O cover, unfortunately, does not make your motherboard perform better. Like, yeah, it makes it easier to disassemble, and it's a sign of quality, like, and it adds manufacturing cost. That it does not make the board better. And I think this one... This is, like, the worst way of doing this, because this is how you cut traces. Oh man, that reminds me of, like, people... Well, I didn't see it that often, but, like, people breaking off capacitors on NVIDIA GPUs, because NVIDIA would have, like... They'd have a backplate, and then they have hex head, like... Yeah, they'd have hex heads with a thread in them, so they wouldn't take they wouldn't be Phillips or anything. So that you know... And then you'd get the occasional person who would do it with, who would try to take those off with, well, take those out with pliers, and there's capacitors near those a lot of the time, and that's how you break your very expensive GPU. Okay. Also, this thermal pad is crap. Yeah, this is some crap thermal pad. It's not too bad on the, well, actually no, that's actually not that bad on surface area. Right, like, yeah, it doesn't look impressive, but if you think about it, like... Because, like, if you cut fins into it this way, the whole thing is so thin, I don't think that would make too much of a difference. Like, it's not a great heatsink, and the thermal pad's kind of garbage, but... Yeah, anyway, and here's the VRM, and oh my god, those inductors are adorable. It's like... Yeah, that might be a bit of an issue, along with the power plane that drops 130 millivolts. There's like 1 ohm of power plane resistance on this board. So this guy... Wait, what? Oh no. Oh boy. So if I just measure the casing instead of the tabs... Well, the thing is, like, the problem with the tabs is there's solder on those, so it might be a bit... So that's like, okay, so I really overestimated how square these are. They're like maybe a 6.5, 6.7 or something. Maybe get the, oh, I can get this one. Yeah, these are like 6.5 millimeters. Like, yeah, something like 6.5, and these, and then from like this angle, they're like, well, man, 7.6 maybe? 7 something. So, yeah, these are tiny. And how tall are they? See, how am I going to even measure the height of these stupid things? I guess I could measure the height of the PCB and then... Yeah, okay. We'll do it that way. The PCB is 1.4 millimeters. When I go over the inductor, it's like 5 point... Okay, no, I think I went over a cap leg. 5.2-ish, something like that. So... Off. So that's... So, what is that? I can't do... 5.2 minus 1.4, what is that? Wait, use bottom stick to get depth. Like, these look like this. They... Like... I can't use this part. Like, that's not gonna work. So... They're 3.8. Yeah, so they're like 4 millimeters tall, probably. Maybe not even. And they're like 6.5 wide and 7 something long. So these are like definitely some of the smallest inductors I've seen on a motherboard in the main power delivery. I think this is like what Gigabyte uses for like minor supporting rails on their boards. These look very similar to those. Anyway, I'm gonna go grab my collection of spare inductors, and we'll see what I can maybe cram in there. Because I don't really, well, I could pull the capacitors, but I don't really want to do that. So there we have my box of like salvaged parts. And we want... So I was thinking, oh, what's this? It's, no, that's a 30. That's too high. Because the thing is, this uses smart power stages, so we should be able to just replace all the inductors and it'll work just fine. But the main concern is finding adequate inductors. What's this? This is a 36. Nope. Oh, this is a 19. That's a bit low. I wanted... How do I not have any 220s? I thought I had 220s. That's a 40. What's this? That's a 68. Nope. 17. It's the wrong... No, those are 15s. I don't have 22s. I just straight up don't have 22s, apparently. Oops. I thought I had 22s. Oh, no, I do have a 22. This is a 22. So, do I have more of those? Okay, now that's a 56. I think I used a bunch of the 20... Actually, I definitely used a bunch of the 22s. I might need to go salvage some more of them. That's a 19. Okay, well, I'm pretty sure I have... Maybe I haven't scrapped all of the Vegas completely. And I was kind of hoping that maybe I could put these, like, sideways or something. Like that. But looking at that, that looks like that's probably not going to work. Like, the VRM heatsink won't fit anymore. Yeah, that's not going to work. Damn it. But the thing is, even if I put them, like, flat, then... Yeah, like, there's no way... Like, the caps are just totally getting in the way of that if I tried to do something like this. So there's, like, some... No, that's not going to clear. Yeah, that's just not going to clear, so that... Okay, so it looks like if I want to replace all the inductors, I'll have to pull all the capacitors first. And then I can replace the inductors. Which is like... The thing is, I don't really want to be replacing the capacitors. And then the other plan is to basically just pull some wires from over here to the V-core capacitors. I want to check how many V-core caps there are to see how difficult this will be to do. Okay, so that's V-core, and this is ground, right? So the 3950X is still in there, so, you know, we have 0.5 ohms of resistance anyway. Got V-core over here. What about here? Also V-core. Okay, well, that's not very convenient. Ground. V-core, but not convenient. What about you? And you? Also ground. Wait, is this V-core? That would be great. Oh, I think... And I think that's the SOC. Yeah, that's the SOC. Damn it. Oh, that's a real shame. There's like one cap here that's V-core. Unless... Oh, wait. That one seems to be as well. That one's ground. What's this? That doesn't seem to be connected to anything. That's fun. Ground again. And more V-core. So there's like... Yeah, that's super annoying though. Because I was like, oh, I'll just throw some 18 gauge wires on there. And then it's like, wait a minute. None of these capacitors are going to take an 18 gauge very cleanly. Yeah, and oh, and they have the whole alternating ground power thing going on, don't they? Oh wait, no, this one's ground again. No, that's ground again. Oh well. And more ground. V-core. V-core is the other side V-core? No, that's ground. Man, so they have like... Now, the reason why this is done is it helps with power delivery. But basically, like, the caps are like V-core, ground, ground, V... Like, they keep alternating the position, like, switching the side which the... yeah, like, they keep alternating the... What... Like, you don't have one row of just V-core and then a ground strip. You have V-core, ground, ground, V-core, V-core. It's just like, yeah, so attaching a big piece of wire to any of that is just, like, not happening because the wire is going to try, like, connect 3 caps at the same time. Which is kind of what I was hoping for, is, like, I'd find, like, 3 capacitors in a line that are all the same thing on the same side, and then could maybe put, like, a little copper plate off of them, and then run the wires to that, but it's just like, okay, well, that's not an option. I mean, I could still do a copper plate and get, like, all fiddly with attaching it to multiple different capacitors at the same time, but that really sucks. And on the front of the board, there's no chance, because, yeah, there's no chance on the front. Oh, well. So I guess I'm just going to have to run, like, thin wires. Which is like I don't want to run thin wires because that'll make it much less effective than if I ran fat wires. Oh well. I'm done. I'm done with this for today. Other stuff to work on. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the stream because it's over now. So thanks for watching. Thanks for, thanks for the support. It allows me to buy sketchy motherboards like this one here. And sledgehammer it for content. No, even as bad as the board is, that is a waste of a board. Like, it's not, like, there's a difference between bad, as in, like, I'm disappointed with the board, and so bad that it actually deserves to get a sledgehammer. This isn't on the level of, like, I would hit this with a sledgehammer. So, yeah. Well, I guess I'll do a thermal test of this board. Do people want a PCB breakdown of this? Oh, okay, so people do want a PCB breakdown of this. We'll do it. I'll probably do something like that. Yeah, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some thermal testing on it. The thing is, like, the thermal testing right now is, like, it overheats at stock if you use an AIO. That's a valid thermal test, isn't it? If you don't want the MOBO. No, I want to mod the board. I want to mod it. I want to see if I can fix Biostar's VRM. Right? Because, like, it's one thing to talk shit about something and then not know how to fix it. Well, I think it gives you, like, no, if you're going to talk shit about something and then you also fix whatever was wrong with it, then, like, it gives you more credit, in my opinion. So I really want to mess around with trying to fix this. So figure out how to upgrade the power plane. Figure out, like, maybe I'll just order new inductors for it from DigiKey. Which that just seems really excessive. Like, I could just pull all the capacitors and replace the capacitors. Like, it's always an option as well. A stock cooler would, of course, fix the VRM heat output. Like, running it with a stock cooler will fix the VRM thermal issues. Like, I ran the freaking A520MH on a stock cooler with a 3950X, and that wouldn't overheat as long as you had well, that was running at like 100 degrees. The stock cooler is literally designed to cool the VRM, right? Like, of course it's going to run fine with a stock cooler. But, like, the thing is, like, this is a $130 board. This is a pretty expensive motherboard. So I'm kind of thinking, like I want to fix the power plane. That's the easy one. Replacing all the inductors is, like, I don't have the right size. Well, the thing is like, I'm concerned if I just pull all the capacitors and then just try to put them back on, I'm going to somehow make it worse. So I'm going to need oscilloscope measurements for this. Now, luckily, if you're just like luckily, so the reason I never finished doing oscilloscope measurements for X570 is not because I like gave up on it because I thought it was boring, but it was partly that. But the bigger problem was like getting those measurements most of the time. Like if you want measurements that are useful for comparing one motherboard against another, they're super difficult to take. But if I'm just going to be modifying this board, then all I have to do is like I can take a measurement from behind the CPU socket, right? Because we don't have to compare this board against other boards. I just need to compare this board against itself. And so as long as I'm measuring from the exact same spot in the socket, um, we're going to see improvements. So, because my main concern is if I pull these capacitors and replace them, I might like make the board worse by accident. And so I need an oscilloscope measurement. Actually, I could upgrade the capacitors. I have a bunch of spare like I got polymers for days. So I could actually replace all of the through-hole caps with SMD caps. We could see what that does to the voltage regulation. I could add some extra multi-layer ceramics if I felt like it. That seems excessive. Actually, no. Wait a minute. Oh, I don't really have an easy ground on the top side of the board. If I added my own ground plane, that wouldn't be an issue. I've always... Because basically what I'm thinking about, like, using the SMD caps, the main issue is, like, the only ground I have available on either side of the board, like, on the back or the front, is the ground from where the current capacitors get ground. Oh, wait, no, it's not. There's these guys. I could steal ground from those. Which is probably not ideal. But I could totally steal ground from those. Because basically, like, if I pull these and put big inductors on the top, then I could... How much space would I have? It might work. The thing is, I need ground that's, like, actually connected, like, properly, that... Like, technically, yes, cooler mounting holes would be ground. I don't know how well grounded they are. Like, there's a difference between ground planes designed for handling power and ground planes which are, like, just grounded for the sake of being grounded. I think I'll just pull the through-hole caps on the front, throw bigger inductors on the front, and then throw new caps onto the back of the board. Like, I'll just have them, like... Like, I'll do that. And then I'll have the power plane upgrade going from forward. Because on the front, there probably won't be any space to attach anything. Well, actually, I could maybe throw, like, some more multi-layer ceramics on the front. Yeah, I have some more dead GPUs that I could scrap, so I'll scrap another card for, like, 10 microfarad multi-layer ceramics or something, and we'll just use those. I don't think they'll do much, but it'll look like... It'll look less empty. Actually, maybe. Oh, come on. No, that's not a big enough picture. That's also not big enough. Damn it. Why are... I hate how all the pictures for, like, old hardware are tiny. Like, absolutely tiny. Like, 500 by 500 pixels. That is not a picture. That's an icon. Oh, finally found a 1600 by 1300. Hopefully... What? No, please don't tell me that you scrapped the original image. They did. And then they... Oh, man. And then there's the websites that, like, had high-res pictures, and then they just scrapped them. Oh. Oh, found one. Okay, there we go. So, what I'm thinking is... Oops. No. Idiot. I'm thinking is I could make the board look like that. It's like, oh, there's not enough space for through-hole capacitors? Just all ceramic. Now, the current through-hole caps are 56 microfarads each. So if I wanted to do that, I would need to 560 microfarads each. So, actually, you know what? I'm not doing that. That's dumb. Because, yeah, getting 560 microfarads of multi-layer ceramics is a pain. Massive pain. Oh yeah, this is one of those old motherboards that if I ever find one of these on eBay, I'm buying it. I don't even know if it's good, but it looks cool. And I want one. Yeah, but the thing is, if I was doing it with 47 microfarad, actually no, even with 47s, it would take forever. Like I'd need to use like 100 microfarad multi-layer ceramics, and those aren't particularly cheap. So, yeah, no. Like honestly, if I was doing it with 100 microfarad multi-layer ceramics, it would cost almost as much as the damn. Well, let's check DigiKey. Like, admittedly, DigiKey is not the cheapest place to get your capacitors from, but it's like you can get like it'll give us a rough idea. It'll give us a rough idea, and I like their search system. Okay, so I want. Let's check these. And I want minimum price, but I'm also only gonna buy like 100 of them. Actually, nah, not even 100. These normally cost so much that I'm not buying that many. Say 20. X5R. So the temperature tolerance on this is terrible. So if the VRM doesn't if the VRM thermals don't improve, that's bad. Okay, let's go to. Oh no. 105 is fine, as far as I'm concerned. Oh, okay, so we could get half a pound per 100 microfarads, and I need 5.6 cat. Okay, wait. There's 6 of the 560s. Where's my phone? 6 times. So I'd need like 30 of these. It's 13 quid of caps. I'm not putting 13 quid of capacitors onto this pile of trash. Like, no, I'm not doing that. Especially if I also might need to replace, buy... Actually, no, because I'm not going to buy new inductors. Yeah, I'm still not putting 13 quid worth of capacitors on it. Keep spamming and you're just gonna get banned. Wait, it's put user in timeout? Oh well, works for me. It's time to simp for BZ's MLCCs. As that's still not, like, thanks for the super chat, but that's still not gonna get me to buy a bunch of 100 microfarad caps. No, well, actually no. You might get me to buy a bunch of 100 microfarad caps. I'm not gonna put them on this board. That is a waste of good capacitors. That is a massive waste of good capacitors. What other options do I have? Like, no, I'm just gonna lay the capacitors down. Screw it. Like, yeah, like, who cares about case compatibility and that kind of thing? It's not like I'm ever gonna put it in a case. The thing is, I do want to eventually get rid of the board. That's kind of my other concern is like I don't want the board forever. And even if I do fix it, I don't know, maybe I'll just like give it away or something. Actually, I'll just sell it. Just buy bad caps. I'm taking you don't like this Biostar board. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't really like it. It's not good. Like, it's not super terrible, but it is bad. Do the VRMs on the B550 Aorus Pro V1 and V2 perform the same? There's a chance the V2 has better transient response. For an MATX version of that DFI X58. Yeah, but the MATX version doesn't have this VRM. The MATX version of this board is lame. The VRM on the MATX version looks like... Why is Google Images so bad? The MATX version looks like this. See that? Those are boring through-hole capacitors. I want glorious ceramic. Fantastic ceramic. Not this. Also, these aren't coupled inductors. I want inductors so complicated that I don't understand how they work on my motherboard. Thank you very much. Like, legit, these are like magic to me. I have no idea how that, like, I've tried to read the document, like, tried to read some papers about how this is supposed to work. It takes too much electrical engineering understanding for me to understand how these are supposed to work. Way too, like, so I want the super fancy inductors that go beyond my understanding, and then the multi-layer ceramics. Thank you very much. No boring regular inductors that I understand and regular caps that kind of suck. I'm surprised though. I didn't think 100 microfarad. The thing is, these are also huge. Like, these are 1210s, so they're not super compact. But PCB breakdown of that Volterra VRM when? If I ever find one of these boards on eBay, then. Assign the MB and we'll hang it on the wall as a piece of art. Yeah, I might do that. Like, I might sell it as like a Buildzoid edition or something. I don't know. But the thing is, like, throwing a bunch of capacitors, like expensive capacitors at it is a waste, in my opinion. Like, if I had a bunch of these 100 microfarad caps, they'd end up on like a 7970 or something before they end up on the B550 Biostar board. Before they'd end up on this thing. Actually, here's a wackier idea, okay? Oops, sorry for maxing out the mic. Here's a wackier idea. No bulk capacitance over here, right? Because the board won't fit in a case once I do the power bridges. What if I just whack all the caps directly behind the socket? Actually, I don't think there's enough space. I think I could do that. I could kind of do that. I could try. Pro OC bricked edition. Nah, I want. I'm not gonna break the board. Like, keep in mind that my Rampage, well, Maximus 11 gene, alright, that thing's modded to hell and back. Like, what I plan to do to this, I've kind of done to the Maximus 11 gene already. I mean, I didn't do a power bridge on that, but I did all of the like, I did a bunch of extra caps, I did a bunch of new, like, different inductors. But the thing is, on that board, the inductors were the same size as what was already on there. Or, well, not same size, they had the same footprint. So it wasn't a real, like, I wasn't struggling to get the inductors to fit between the capacitors and the power stages. Whereas with this board, it's like, caps are, like, there's no space. Right? Like, they basically put a laptop VRM onto an MATX motherboard. It's like, this is the VRM. That's it. Like, that's the entire VRM. And then this is all just empty space to get to the CPU, which is just... Like, if they moved the caps, like, forward a couple millimeters, I could fit whatever inductor I want. And instead it's like, nope. Space is not a problem. No one needs to put it in a case. Yeah, I'm just going to throw them on the back. How viable is it to use a GPU e-power board on a CPU? The main problem you run into is CPUs tend to get really, really upset when their VRM, like, doesn't want to talk to them. So, like, actually, and it's not even the CPU, it's like the whole motherboard gets super upset if something's wrong with the VRM. So the main concern there is, like... Well, I've had an idea for a workaround for that, where you'd basically, instead of, like, so normally with an e-power, you remove all the inductors and then remove the control, like, remove everything that was originally there. But I had an idea. What if instead of removing all the inductors, you just desoldered them, right? And then stood them up so that they wouldn't go to the power plane anymore, so they stand up, and then you just, like, bridge them all together so that they still have an output, whack, like, one capacitor on the end of that, and then put, like, a resistor to ground so that the VRM still thinks that it's powering something. So it doesn't, you know, the VRM still thinks it's powering something. You'd have to do something about the dye sense voltage, like the voltage sensing circuitry. But you could basically have the VRM just powering like a resistor. Maybe, like, it could maybe even be like a 100 ohm resistor, so you wouldn't be burning, like, you wouldn't be burning a ton of power for no reason. And then, you just put the e-power like you normally do, except now you have a bunch of inductors in the way. Fix it, then send it to Biostar. I'm pretty sure the engineering team at Biostar knows how to not make a garbage power plane. It's just like they don't know how to do it on a, like, it's not viable to do that on a motherboard this cheap. One ohm power resistor. Hell, well, actually, you wouldn't even really need like a high power resistor because it's like you'd just be applying like a volt to it. I tried downloading BlueStacks. I don't know anything about BlueStacks, so I'm gonna leave you with that. Wait, I get B-Solid Clock Watchdog timeout. Clock Watchdog timeout is normally CPU instability, but yeah, I don't know anything about BlueStacks. Does it still BSOD if you're at stock? Like, that's normally the best way. Like, go back to stock and see if it still crashes. It just needs an oil change, BC. It's got plenty of oil. You see all that, like, you see that dark stain around the VRM? Plenty of silicone oil right there. Anyway, I said I'd end the stream, and I've not ended the stream. So, now let's end the stream. Thank you for watching. This motherboard is not that great. It's also not that bad, but it's really not that great. And, goodbye, I guess.